Okay, so apart from just adding and changing colors, we can also add a texture in here. Let me just delete this principle out of the way for the minute. Alright, so to add a texture, we could go Shift A, we could add a texture and an image texture, which is there. Okay, if we plug it into the color, we actually haven't got a texture, and whenever we got a missing texture in Blender, we get this pink color. Okay, same can go for HDRI's environments. Wherever you see this pink color, it means there is a texture missing. Maybe you've moved it on your hard disk, or you've deleted it, or something like that, but Blender can't find it. But I do have textures. Let me open up. I've got one on my desktop. I've got two on my desktop actually. Grid 1 and Grid 2. They're the same texture with a slight difference, but we'll come to that. Let's open up Grid 1. Okay, and now you'll see this texture has been applied to the model. Just to make things clearer, I'm going to get rid of this mix and glossy for the minute. Just move them out of the way. Unused nodes aren't going to affect your texture, okay, because basically a node is basically a flow chart, a process chart. Okay, so if something's not connected to the output, it's not going to have an effect. So it's quite acceptable, although it's probably not best practice, to leave your unused nodes out of sight. Right, now one thing I wanted to talk about was I've been hearing a lot lately about blurry textures. And if we move in and out, scrolling out, let's try this in Look Dev actually. There we go. We scroll in and out, we've got quite a sharp texture there. But I also have another texture which you've seen, so let me duplicate this image or this node. Let me open up the second texture, which was Grid 2. On my desktop. There we go. Let me zoom in here. Now let me plug that in instead, and you'll see the texture is blurry. From a distance they're going to look very similar, and there is a difference there, but not discernible. But when we get up close, you can see how blurred that is. And what's the difference between these two textures? Well, let's go to my desktop for a minute, and I've got these two textures, and I'm going to look at the properties on both of them. Right, so if we go to the details on each one, you see this Grid 1 is 8000 by 8000 pixels. It's very high resolution. If we look at Grid 2, it's a 1024, very low resolution. Low for what the application we're using it for. So when you're getting blurry textures, you really need to pay attention to what textures you are using. Have you got enough resolution on them for what you're trying to show, for the detail you're trying to use? So it really is important to use high quality textures. You can't just grab a screen grab from the internet of a texture that's 256 pixels and expect quality from it. It's just not going to happen. Pay very close attention to your textures. Alright, so I did this by adding Shift A, adding a texture and an image texture. Let me delete these two and delete this one. If we've got Node Wrangler installed, which you should, because we said that from day one, a quick way to add a texture is to highlight your shader and Control T, making sure your mouse is in the window. Okay, so it's added and connected the image texture, so I can just go ahead and open up that Grid 1 texture. But it's added two more nodes here. Okay, notice once again the headers are different colors depending on what type of node they are. Basically, this first node is telling Blender to use the UV unwrap, and if we go into UV editing here, you can see that this sphere is already unwrapped as a default unwrap, which is working fine. This second node is a mapping node. Okay, and with this we can control aspects of where the texture maps onto the object. So for example, rotation, if I was to rotate on a Z, you can see it turning there. Same with X and same with Y. The other thing we can do here, incidentally, to reset any sliders in Blender, if you right click on a slider, reset all or reset single to default values. I'm going to reset all to reset all my rotations. The other thing we've got control over here is the scale, so we can make these textures bunch up in one direction. Let's reset all to default, and the scale has come out as 0. Should be 1. So what I've done here is I've put my mouse on the first window and I've clicked and dragged it down all 3 windows, and then I can change all 3 at once. There we go. So we could scale up on the X and the Y, and basically this is acting like repeats in Second Life, where our texture's been repeated over and over. Okay, let's reset that to 1. Anything else to say here at the minute? No, not the minute. When we come to making procedural textures, we'll be changing this from UV to generated, but I'll explain more about that later. The other thing about nodes, if you notice, the inputs sockets and the output sockets are color coded, and generally speaking, same color goes to same color. So we've got a blue going to a blue, same here, a blue going to a blue. On the output we got a yellow and a white. Okay, I'm using the yellow to the yellow, and once again on the output here we got a green to green. If you try and remember to keep color to color, there are exceptions to this, but if you try and remember to keep color to color, you're normally on track. People do get confused, well, which one do I plug it into? Plug it into the one with the same color.